Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, I am Charlie Tolhurst, and welcome to the Globetrotter Newscast for today, the 15th of Feb. And it's the 15th of Feb, a day that we all thought was going to be special, and it is, because the government have hit their target of vaccinating the most vulnerable people, the top 4 cohorts by mid-Feb, and they've managed to do it, Zach, haven't they?
Oh, yes, they have. Great introduction. Welcome. Yes, so, yes, all the top 4 groups are now done. That's great news. So we're on the way to restrictions being lifted starting from maybe March and probably announced for next week. This time next week, we'll probably be watching our TVs as we watch Boris getting questions and announcing his lockdown plan. He's hosting a press conference at 5 o'clock tonight, but yes. The top 5, the top 4, are now done and dusted. And we have passed the 15 million mark just before the 15th of February as well. We managed to hit the 15 million on Valentine's Day. You can give a lot of love to that. So, yes, what's an achievement, by the way? Since this, the Pfizer vaccine, the Oxford vaccine has come out, this population been vaccinated so far. So I think we managed to vaccinate about 22% of our population within our time, and that's incredible, Charlie. That is absolutely incredible for a first dose. Obviously, we're waiting a little bit because the government have delayed the decision to do between the second dose and the first dose, so we're waiting 3 months more than 3 weeks. But yes, honestly, Charlie, it's brilliant. And we're really rolling with this. And now the plans are starting to inside the government's minds are now starting to come out into the papers a little bit. We're going to hear a lot about the speculation about what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. Today is the legal date, by the way, that the government have to review the restrictions. This is today's legal date, second law. So the government are going to go through all the data today. Obviously, look at the vaccines, look at the hospitalization, look at the cases as well, and see what we can do with what we have so far, what can be eased, what can't be eased, what should be put down the road. And then we're going to see that timeline escalate from next week. Now, looking at the media broadcast that the Conservative ministers and Boris Johnson himself been doing, it's going to be a very slow but steady process. And whatever date we see on the plan next week may not be final, and it could be put a little bit, future into the distance, but we'll get a rough idea. So today they're looking all over the data. There are going to be decisions that have got to be made. They're going to be leaking out over the papers, presumably over the next week or so, inside what the governments are thinking. We may find out all the details in on the papers on Monday morning. You never know, but but yes, 15 million hit today. Yesterday, sorry. The top 4 have all been hit. The groups of first doses, and now the over 65s are now starting to receive their letters or phone calls, whatever is best for them. It's all roll on vaccine now, all the way until we get to the top 9 now. And then hopefully that'll be done by the end of April, end of May, potentially. And then who knows what else is there onwards.
I just wanted to touch on that, Zach, very quickly, because there's been a bit of a rebellion in the Tory party and the Conservatives, because yesterday 63 Conservative MPs signed a letter calling for the Prime Minister to remove all the coronavirus restrictions by the end of April and the start of May. I mean, that is very optimistic, and it's certainly growing now, isn't it, Zach? We've got the likes of Sir Desmond Swain, the COVID recovery group of Steve Baker and Mark Harper, but also another MP called Charles Walker has also joined that ever-growing list as well.
There you go. You accidentally removed me. There we go. That's fine. I had a that's not right. But yeah, 63 Conservative MPs yesterday wrote a letter to Boris Johnson. Now, these are all 63 of them, the COVID recovery group led by Steve Baker. Steve Baker, as you know, is most famous for, leading the European Research Group. This letter signed by 63 MPs said that there'll be no justification for restrictions to remain once all the over 50s have been jabbed. They called the 8th of March schools reopening as a national priority, and said pubs and restaurants should be allowed to open in a COVID-secure way by Easter. Now, that's very optimistic. However, what's in the detail is also the number that's signing on. They have 60 Conservative MPs who could cause trouble. Presumably, this lockdown is going to be subject to a vote eventually. We don't know, but let's see. But 60 63, I think it was, around like that, Conservative MPs who are lining up Boris Johnson to do what they say to do. And why is this significant? Is because if it's just, say instance we do get a vote in the future, and let's just say that Labour would vote, all the opposition parties would vote against all the message. Now, I'm saying that's probably unlikely to happen because you'll probably find that Labour might, at worst, abstain. But let's say if we did get into this situation where Labour or all the opposition parties voted against, if 63 disagreed with what the Prime Minister's doing, that would be enough for a rebellion, and that would be enough to, to defeat the government. So it's very much likely that it may be that Boris Johnson will need Labour votes to get it through if the 63 don't support it. But I think that would be pretty easy, to be fair to the Prime Minister. Although this is the 63 that will be the most impatient. I would say most impatient because they are the ones that are advocating much lesser restrictions. So, this is going to be a bit of a balancing act. They've also called for permanent immunity from COVID-related lockdowns and restrictions. I'll be very interested to see if there's any variants that cause that sort of thing that change their mind. But yes, next week is going to be extremely, extremely important. Not just for the plan, but watching what these 63 Tory MPs respond, because they are going to need the Boris's votes more than ever. And this is important because they're the most impatient.
Yeah.
They want their civil liberties back. They want all them back. So they are going in hard on the Prime Minister. There's a different approach from the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister wants to be cautious and listen to the scientific advice, although, well, we'll get onto that whether they are.
Know that.
We'll get onto that later. Or you want to listen to the COVID recovery group who want to go fast and hard and just want to get out the pain and misery of COVID restrictions. So, yeah, this is going to be a very tightrope for the Prime Minister to walk on. It seems from what the language he's been using within his interviews, he's going to go for the slower approach, not necessarily press all of them. So, yeah, I'd be very interested to watch out for how the COVID recovery group react when the timeline is announced. Next Monday.
Next week. It's going to be interesting, Zach, because you've got to think as well. It's going to be interesting how Boris is going to announce this, because it's getting really tense in the Conservative Party. There's rebellions galore. I know exactly what's happening right there in that party. It is getting pretty heated. And I know a lot of people are watching this today, seeing the figures. There is a lag over the weekend with the figures. 9,765 new positive cases were recorded in the last 24 hours. The deaths were 230, which is actually very encouraging for a weekend lag. That's a lot lower than last weekend. Patients admitted 1,641, still fairly high, but that again is down 25% from the week before. So it is encouraging. Obviously, the number of deaths, though, sadly to report, though, and the deaths toll is sadly 117,396, with more loss of all that there are many fatalities. I'd just like to say my heart goes out to every one of those people who's lost a loved one to COVID-19. Still a tragic death toll, but we are looking a lot better than we did at the start of the lockdown. So we're going to see exactly what happens next Monday. Just a quick update, Zach. Is that going to be in Parliament next week, potentially at 3:30 when Boris makes his
I would imagine that he will announce it first in Parliament, because they are back next week on Monday. They are off this week, so there's been no Prime Minister's questions.
Recess is on this week.
But recess ends next week. I imagine it ends next Monday, and then we'll probably get an announcement for the Prime Minister in Parliament first. Then most likely he will do then a prime time news conference in the evening after his parliamentary grilling. So yeah, that's what to expect. So expect quite a lot really to be announced. Obviously on the prime time slot and in Parliament first, where all the details are going to be announced. Yeah.
So next week we are expecting the Prime Minister Boris Johnson to be announcing the roadmap in Parliament. And of course, there'll be some scrutiny from MPs, including Tory backbenchers, and also opposition parties as well will have their say in the debate. And then, of course, there should also be a news conference next week at number 10 Downing Street. The press conference, by the way, is on at 5 o'clock. The Prime Minister will be joined by Professor Chris Whitty and also the NHS Executive Director, Dr. Simon Stevens. So Simon Stevens will be joining Boris at that news conference. You can watch that live on BBC News and any news channel from 5 o'clock as well. Zach, I want to move on to hotel quarantine now. This comes into force today, and there has been a lot of talk about a 10-year prison sentence for basically lying what country you come from. And it's really crazy because basically if you say you come from France, but you came from Spain, you have to you'll immediately be hit with this 10-year prison sentence. I don't know what Matt Hancock was announcing the other week. It sounded like a very draconian measure, didn't it?
Wow, I have to say I was pretty shocked when I heard this. I was thinking 10 years for lying out your location. I mean, you get murder for less than that, even manslaughter. I remember I know this is a South African statistic. I remember Oscar. I think it was Oscar Pistorius who murdered someone and got 8 years or something like out of that in South Africa. I know their system's a bit different over there, but you can take that as a relevant example. But yes, it's up to 10 years. So the judges don't have to give 10 years, but they can slap on 10 years if they want to. But in honest to God, Charlie, what judge would give a 10-year sentence to Fabian on a forum about where you are? In normal times, if you can go meeting somewhere and Fib, you'll probably get a year. You'll probably get a few months or so. So I don't think it was Matt Hancock who had a hand on that. I bet it was Priti Patel, because Priti Patel is a really tough woman, you see, and she'll come up with the most crazy ideas. And so I wouldn't be surprised to hear to me if that was out the Priti Patel book. I think it's wild. I think it's it's more of a scare measure for people actually not to travel into this country. I think. Although there's going to be a lot that do travel into this country. I mean, I saw pictures this morning of people coming in from the coach from Heathrow and being escorted to their hotels, which is very costly, by the way.
£1,750 is the price. Yeah, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so that means don't take your holidays, basically, because you're banned for taking holidays. So don't take your holidays because you're going to rack up a fair bit of money just to come back to this country. So I don't think if someone does break the rule, it's up to 10 years. So the judge doesn't have to give them 10 years. They could give them 1 or 2 if needed to be. But I don't think judges are going to use 10 years. I think it's more of a tactic not to allow people to come in here and out. Really, to just be play by the rules or take tough. I can't see judges, professional legal judges in the country given 10 years for fibbing on the form when you could get away for murder for less than that. It's just, it's a bit of a wild idea. But the thing is about it, Charlie, as much wild it sounds, it does actually have public support. Now, I know it's a bit. Some people think it's a bit draconian, a bit stupid, and then you think it's crazy. But then you look at the poll. I think it was one YouGov poll, which suggested that it had quite a fair bit of support. So actually, it may sound stupid, but the public are actually behind this. I can get why. Understand why with a clickbait 10-year sentence, but yeah, although it's got the support, it's just a bit of a crazy idea of giving 10 years to fibbing on the form, or not really, telling the truth about where you are. Really, it is kind of draconian and a bit peculiar, I think.
Oh God, I mean, Zach, it is utterly. I don't understand the fine. It's just crazy. It's bizarre what the hell Secretary Matt Hancock announced last week in the House of Commons. It's crazy to see that fine being issued of 10 years. Basically, if you lie from up to 10 years, to basically say that I have not come from the right country, you've lied about what country you've come from into the UK. I mean, it is crazy. And let me know down in the comments below. Do you think the 10-year prison sentence for lying about what hotel you come from into the UK is enough? Please comment down below on the Globetrotter Newscast. I'd love to hear what your opinions are about this 10-year prison sentence, because I'm finding it quite amusing at the moment, to be honest, actually seeing this weird news, because it's certainly very peculiar and something that I think from the government's perspective is quite crazy, should I say. Right, we're now going to move on, Zach, to Donald Trump. Second impeachment, lots of news on this over the last few days, and it seems to be gathering pace, does this impeachment. What do you make so far of the impeachment trial in the United States Congress and Senate?
Yes. This wrapped up over the weekend, actually, Charlie, with an acquittal of Donald Trump, actually, for the second time. I actually watched all of it. Very interesting. You will not be surprised to hear I watched all of it. In my opinion, actually, watching it, the prosecutors made a really good case, actually, to impeach him. Made a very powerful argument. I have to say that it was very moving at times as well, and harrowing, because I think that was the point purpose of it. And then you had some really crazy Trump lawyers who probably was employed on the cheap. And then you had some of this Michael Van den Berg, someone, I don't even know what his name is. He sounds a bit Dutch. And he honestly, he looked angry every time he turned up. It was quite wild, actually, to be fair. He was really angry, actually. And then going back to the final day of the trial, Charlie, on Saturday, and then we had the very interesting situations where this story via CNN came out via Friday night, and the whole dynamic of the trial changed because Democrats on Saturday called for witnesses. Okay, they wanted this woman, this congresswoman who voted for impeachment, to testify. Basically over a phone call that Kevin McCarthy made to Donald Trump, where apparently it was a shouting match, and Donald Trump appeared to blame Antifa for the riots. Obviously, that wasn't true. Whilst Kevin McCarthy reminded him that it was his supporters that was raiding the Capitol, and asking him to tell his supporters not to. And it was this information only just came out the Friday night, and Democrats called for witnesses on the Saturdays, and then so it put the whole trial in a bit of uncertainty, because to get witnesses, you need to subpoena witnesses, you need to give them a dispense motion as well, and this takes weeks potentially. So this would have delayed the trial for weeks, and that would have actually delayed the Senate debating proper issues such as COVID, stimulus, and the American recovery package that Joe Biden has proposed. So they didn't bother with witnesses, and then they got a written record statement from the congresswoman onto the record for their closing arguments. It didn't change much at the end of the day because it resulted in acquittal. I think it was 57 to 43. The results were. 7 Republicans voted to convict President Trump. Although whilst there was a majority, there wasn't the 2/3, which was 67. So they're missing 10, and Donald Trump was acquitted.
Voted to acquit. Just to let you know.
Mitch McConnell voted to acquit, although he gave quite a harrowing response about Trump's actions afterwards. Now, the reason why he voted to acquit, because it was on the constitutional argument about whether this trial was constitutional or unconstitutional. Many in the Republican Party thought this was unconstitutional because the president was being impeached after he left office. However, a lot of law professors have said that actually it is constitutional to impeach a president after they left office and disqualify him because of the language used in the Constitution. I remember Andrew Johnson in the 1800s being impeached years ago after he left office. So there is some historical context to this, Charlie. But at the end of the day, you know, the Republicans did not feel like it was constitutional. So they, rather than hearing the argument, they voted to acquit based on the constitutional argument. 7 Republicans did, however, act impartial and voted to find Donald Trump guilty. But at the end of the day, it wasn't enough for 67, which was needed. There were 10 off. But this was the most bipartisan impeachment actually in years, Charlie. Let's just say that, years. Although it did result in acquittal. So at the end of the day, Donald Trump is living loud and strong. And he's still going well. He called it a witch hunt. His press release when he released a statement later that evening, he called it a witch hunt. And he said the great American journey had only just begun. I thought it ended a while ago, but obviously I can't wait it to begin again with the usual chaos that we saw the last time when we tried to make America great again. If what we saw on January 6th was only just beginning, I can't see what the end will look like. What we'd have meteors blown up the planet. It was like meteors. It would blow up the planet. I can just imagine that. That'll probably be last gasp hurrah. SpaceX something will probably crash into America and blow up New York. Yeah, I don't. Actually, I probably shouldn't have said that. They're probably Chicago.
I think Zach as well,
because we know the tragedy in New York.
I think Zach as well. Like he called this the greatest witch hunt in the history of our country, and then he was also seen playing golf just the other day after his Senate trial in Mar-a-Lago, Florida. Apparently as well, Trump loves his golf course, doesn't he? He loves his golf course, and we saw that last week. Joe Biden saying, "Get out your sand trap and get back to the office," and then Trump, of course, shouted him down. And I've been hearing that there's been some reports going around that if the Republicans take back control of the Senate, they could potentially impeach Kamala Harris, who is currently the vice president. And Zach, what do you make of Trump's relationship with Kamala Harris?
To be fair to Charlie, it's a load of nonsense, to be fair, Charlie. I remember when they tried to threaten to impeach Hillary Clinton for no reason in 2017, even if she got in. So I don't know what the purpose of the crime of impeachment would be for Kamala Harris. What exactly has she done wrong? Obviously, I can see it's her being targeted in some racial way. I'm sorry to say this, but it's obviously they're targeted in some racial way, unfortunately. There was Lindsey Graham's, that was a suggestion by Lindsey Graham, who obviously someone who can't actually be taken seriously really in the Republican Party. As for Trump, well, he used to whinge about Barack Obama having, golf now and then. But he's probably the most golfiest president out of a lot of them. So yeah, well, I don't really think you can say much on this. This is just empty threats, really, by the Republican Party. They threatened 300 lawyers. 300 witnesses. When Democrats voted for witnesses on Saturday morning. I don't think you can really take any of the options, anything seriously out of them. I'm afraid. Whatever you think of it.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. Now we're going to move on, Zach, to Australia and New Zealand. Victoria and Auckland both in lockdown. And Zach, the Australian Open's currently on at the moment, and there's been a lot of changes. Like to the event, it's now going behind closed doors. There's been changes to obviously Melbourne's restrictions and Victoria's measures on staying at home. And this is interesting, Zach, because Melbourne have actually reported about 17 cases of the new UK variant, and 3 of them have also been reported in New Zealand. What's the situation like over there at the moment?
Yeah, so New Zealand's had Auckland's gone into partial lockdown now because there's been some cases, I think about 5 cases there, and they appear to be the UK variant of the COVID-19 there. So yeah, so Jacinda Ardern's good work has come to sort of disappointment there, really, to be fair. Not really her fault, to be fair, that the COVID is imported. Has somehow made its way into the New Zealand, but there's a partial lockdown for a few days in Auckland and Melbourne as well, where they're playing the Australian Open, which is now being closed to fans, I think, if I'm correct in saying, because there's been a little outbreak there as well. So the situation was going well, and now they've found a few cases, rather unfortunately, which is obviously a bit of a shame. But yeah, what's got to be done is got to be done, because, as you know, I don't want this hanging around. There's the I think it was the president. I think it was the Daniel Andrews, who's obviously
Premier,
in charge of Victoria, said it was too soon to say whether Victoria will emerge from its circuit breaker, which is planned to be done by Wednesday. And there's only been 1 case there on Monday, and interestingly enough, I should say that. So we don't know whether they're going to remain in lockdown or not there because of the 1 case, but let's see. I if they record 0 the next few days, maybe there is a case for lifting that lockdown, but we don't know. We don't know, Charlie.
It's an interesting one, Zach, isn't it? Because the thing is, the Daniel Andrews said the other day that the UK variant is much more transmissible than the original strain. That is why we have to take tough action. So surely this lockdown or this circuit breaker that Melbourne have done, is it going to work? That's the question. I mean, it's all about suppressing the virus. I mean, obviously, we knew what happened last year. Melbourne had a 6-week shutdown after they had over 700 cases a day at one point. So it's a difficult one, isn't it, Zach? And I mean, I suppose the new variant is much more transmissible, and they are concerned about the health service over there. But I mean, should the Australian Open have even gone ahead? That's the question, given that there was hardly any locally transmitted cases over in Victoria.
Well, I think if that's the case, then, there is a case for, opening up and allowing sports events there if there's no cases. I mean, it's clear that they've put in severe, protocols there to actually help and protect everyone there. So I think there was a case for it going ahead, and I think it will last the whole year. I think it will last the whole distance, actually, to be fair. There's been no major interruptions, to be fair, in the Australian Open. But, I think, there was a case for it beginning. I think, to be fair, I think they've done quite well with what they've done with the hotel quarantine. And everyone's probably following all the health protocols there as well, and they're doing it well. I mean, they've got very interesting regimes, and they take tougher actions whether there's 1 or 2 cases or so. So everyone does really well, really, to be fair, in Australia in terms of decision makings and quick thinking in Australia and New Zealand as well. So I think, to be fair, it's all right to continue that, and I think it will be okay to continue for next week as well, up until the final of the Australian Open.
It's an interesting one, Zach, because it's obviously Australia have got one of the toughest border regimes in the world. The hotel quarantine there is strict. You're into the country, you land in the country, boom, 14 days of hotel quarantine. In this country, if you come from a red list country, like, for example, France, Portugal, or that, you have to self-isolate in government-acquired hotels for 10 days. And you have to take a test on days 2 and 8. If you're both negative, you can leave on day 10. So it's very similar to that. I mean, our border controls are probably not as tough as they are in, say, Australia, for example, where we've got one of the toughest hotel quarantine systems around. So it's going to be interesting, Zach, to see whether the borders at all these countries are secure from new variants of the COVID-19 virus. And speaking about new variants, Zach, there has been some news during last week about some new mutations of the disease in Bristol as well. Do you think that the new mutations will still work effectively against the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine?
Yeah, well, let's see this, because this is interesting, Charlie, because Public Health England would nerve tag we're doing surveillance of what cases they're picking up with COVID, and they've obviously found a mutation of concern. There's been 2 new variants actually, Charlie, one in Manchester and one in Bristol. The one that they're concerned about is the one in Bristol, because what's interesting about this one is that it's got the spread of, say, like the Kent variant, but it's also got the effects as well of the South African variant, where it's got that, that it bypasses the protein. So what happens is, when it bypasses the protein, it means that it may evade the immune system, and that could have effects for, say, vaccines. So there is a bit of concern about the Bristol one, and I think we have to watch out for that. So that's why you've been seeing more door-to-door testing in areas like Bristol, Manchester, Walsall, where South African variants or new variants have been found of COVID-19. They don't appear to be super spreaders yet. So these door-to-door testings are pretty helpful to identify where this virus is and where it's not. So there needs to be some high surveillance of this, and everyone needs to be following the rules, because goodness me, I don't want that variant spreading, because we don't want an even tougher variant like of the Bristol one, which could be worse, to be fair, than the South African or Brazilian one, depending on the information and surveillance that they get from that. So yeah, very concerning, but it's not widespread yet. Let's just say that. And that's a good thing. We just need to keep testing and keep doing more of this, and then we could get rid of it potentially if we isolate, test it when other people that need to be tested. And the door-to-door testing does help a bit as well.
Test, trace, and isolate, Zach, is so important to slow the spread of new variants. You've got to do this, and the government have not been criticised. I've been criticised for not having an effective test and trace system in place. Last year, world-beating system that the Prime Minister pledged. Sadly, what did we get? A system that only made sure that only about 40% of contacts were reached. It wasn't very successful, and even politicians like Nigel Farage lambasted the government over the test and trace system. So it's going to be very interesting. We've got to stop new variants coming in. Keir Starmer said toughen the borders up. Do you agree with him, Zach? Should we be toughening our borders up to stop the new variants coming in, especially potentially making hotel quarantine mandatory for everyone?
Yeah, like I said a few weeks ago, Charlie, I think this hotel quarantine was a half-assed measure, because it only did, you only restricting it for certain countries. Now, Now, here's the thing, though, Charlie. The government could decide in the next few weeks that one country needs to go on the red list because of variants and possible virus exposures there. But I don't think it's good enough. I think it could be that these variants could be found out, and you say those countries that are not on the red list, and someone could come into the country, spread it here, going to 10-day quarantine, but they still have the virus on them, and then go out and then spread them all about. So there is an issue there, Charlie. And I just think, if you're going to do this sort of thing, you do it for everything, not just a couple of countries. So it really should be tough as you can, really, on borders. I think the one Labour described it as been locked in, but the virus is, but our borders open. So yeah, I kind of agree with them on that. It is, the borders are kind of half open to some of those countries. You don't need hotel quarantining.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, Zach, the issue that the quarantine has got to be done strictly. So we've got it's to stop the new variants coming in again, and this is a big thing. We've got to make sure that people who are arriving are quarantined completely, so that they stop the virus transmitting from imported from other countries. It's a very, very important thing. So And that was what happened last year in that first wave when we had 18.3 million people entering the UK within a matter of a few weeks. From February to March, boom, it spread off like wildfires and it ended up causing us to go into a national lockdown. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how we're going to get on with this new hotel quarantine system. Let me know down below, guys, if you've been entering the UK and you have been in hotel quarantine. Please let me know down below on the Globetrotter Newscast. I'd love to hear what your experience would be of you being in quarantine in hotels, because it's very important that we share your experiences. I think a lot of people know that this is a very challenging time at the moment. So please, everyone, make sure that you stay safe if you're traveling into this country. And please follow the guidelines for hotel quarantine in the UK. Now, Zach, moving on, Jonathan Ashworth, Shadow Health Secretary, sent this tweet in just the other day. I'm just going to read it here. We need to lock in vaccination gains by doing more to break transmission as lockdown ends. That means sick pay and isolation support, local tracing and NHS in charge nationally, ventilation and filtration systems in public buildings, and updated mask wearing guidance. What do you make, Zach, of his comments about that particular issue?
I think he's right. I think he's right. Those sort of measures are important. I mean, sick pay has been really, the debate of, for a year now, of how to really, go live and keep well whilst you're with your COVID and still getting the money, that financial support that you need. Because, as you know, you're going to get a certain amount paid out of you for sick pay, rather than, the employers can sometimes say, well, you're off, you're on officially sick pay, we're not going to give you your actual wage, we're going to use the sick pay wage, which is not a lot. I mean, some people on universal credit do get a bonus. That's the thing about it. But, the likes of local testing and tracing are so important, because at the end of the day, there are people, not private firms, who are useless as hell, like Serco and, the corrupt ones who give money to the Tory government, and get contracts for them and then don't really deliver. Whereas you've got these local testing systems are so important, because they actually find that they actually get 90% contacts out there. I mean, to be fair, the test and trace system, actually, I think if management changes that has actually improved, it's 93%, I think the last figure was, of contacts.
That's good.
That they got. So I think improving the efficiency of that has been good. But obviously local testing as well is so important, and local contact tracing is so important as well. Because there's obviously various ways to actually self-isolate if needed to, via the phone or someone coming up to you, knocking onto your door, if needed to be. So yeah, and these things of testing and tracing, I need to isolate people as well, but getting the financial support as well, Charlie, it needs to be, because not everyone survives for a couple £100 on universal credit and need to top up on that. So, and not everyone can survive on sick pay just alone. So there needs to, obviously, I wish there was expanded. I wish, wish everyone got a little bit sick pay, no matter where they were, and need to isolate, because they're losing a bit of their wages. Should there be a cap on who gets it? Like the richest, should they not deserve all that, that sick pay? Maybe they don't. Maybe we need to think about the middle class, the working class and the low incomes, who really deserve sick pay, no matter whether they're on universal credit or not, because at the end of the day, without the money, they're not going to survive. Rather, unfortunately, and they don't want to be in that situation.
It's an interesting one, Zach. I must admit, it's just a lot of people are struggling financially at the moment. We need people to get more financial support in. I know a lot of businesses are really struggling, so that's why we really need many people to just basically, the government to try and give more businesses financial support, those who are self-employed, those who are sole traders. It's a very difficult time for them at the moment. A lot of them are on furlough. I do think the furlough scheme will have to be extended again, because April, that's a bit borderline whether you end the furlough scheme or not. I think probably will have to be extended. I don't know what Rishi Sunak's going to announce next month in the March budget. So it's going to be a very interesting one. And I know a lot of people right now are struggling with financial support. Let me know, guys, down in the comments. Do you think the government should increase the measures to give businesses more financial support? Now we're going to move on, Zach, quickly before we finish. A couple more things. Formula One, McLaren launching their 2021 car today, or this evening actually. The MCL 35 launches at Woking in the McLaren Technology Centre. What do you think? What do you expect McLaren are going to be launching tonight? And what do you expect McLaren are going to be thinking about when they launch this new car?
Well, in terms of the actual colour scheme itself, Charlie, I'm obviously very excited to look forward to seeing the car tonight. Because they're going to be the first one to launch. Looking at the little promotions, I've seen lots of orange, and they focus on the orange car. So I expect the orange scheme to remain. Now, is that going to be? Are they going to keep the blue? We don't know. I don't know what we expect. But obviously, this is an important year for McLaren this year because, as you know, they had a very successful season last year. I think they got a new engine in them this season with Mercedes rather than Honda. I'm sorry, Mercedes rather than Renault. Excuse me, that's my bad. Instead, they could technically be faster on the grid this season. Now we're also going to get into the technical details as well. They may reveal a little bit of that as well, of what they could do, in terms of what the key technical notes are, and see what little secrets that could do to boost their performance. I mean, with their Mercedes engines, obviously, they've had to upgrade quite a lot of car because they've obviously moved different. They obviously have different engine parts now, as well. They've also made significant power unit changes as well, I believe, from what I'm reading as well. It's basically a new car because of the change to Mercedes. So there are changes to the chassis, the gearbox, the cooling layout, and electronics. Let's see what other teams do as well, because I'm very interested. Because obviously, as you know, in-season changes is going to be very interesting as well, because obviously you can use upgrades. We're now going to have the engine freeze for next year as well, Charlie. Where the engine performance is going to be upgrades, going to be really big this year's season because of the engine freeze next year. So there's going to be some key areas as well. James Keys admitted they need to improve their low speed when needed to be. But that's somewhere to find the balance consistency, because they are slower in the slower areas, but faster in the faster areas. So they need to balance that out. So especially probably the West as well, where they could do a bit of improvement there. So it'll be very interesting looking at the technical details as well. I've also just seen as well, Charlie, that obviously whilst we were off, I noticed that Fernando Alonso got taken to hospital, unfortunately, after a bike accident. I've just read he's been discharged, which is great news to see. I think he'll be on the road to full recovery by the looks of it for the start of the season, which is honestly a miracle. But yeah, the focus tonight will be on what the McLaren car looks like, and looking into those little bit of technical information to see where they can find the most important performance, where they can find the balance, how much faster it is, because this will be the last season where they can really put some upgrades, or a little bit more drag on the cars this season, just to reduce the amount of interference a car has whilst following another car. So they may be around about the same speed as last year, potentially. We don't know, with the extra 10% drag, but speed is going to be crucial. I think with Mercedes engine, that car, they'll probably be a bit quicker, actually, and I think they'll be one of the key to look at in the midfield this season. Whether they can nudge up to third, we don't know. Maybe racing. It will be interesting to see how they do with the Aston Martins potentially as well, because they're going to be wanting a big upgrade. Or there's a bit of uncertainty because they're technically a new team. They're the old Racing Point teams out, the Aston Martins in. And yes, we're gonna. So let's. This is where the season ended. This is where we can go into the teeny little details of what we expect from the cars, and it's going to be a race all the way up to pre-season testing now to identify, who could be the big hitters, who's got the edge, who's got the advantage.
Yeah.
And tonight it starts here with McLaren, as well. So that will be shown online. It'll be shown on Sky F1. It'll be on the online or on YouTube as well. So there'll be many ways to watch it as well. and we'll also see the appearance of Lando Norris and McLaren's new driver for this season, Daniel Ricciardo, who's moved from Renault, or now known as Alpine, today. So, yeah, I think exciting times for McLaren ahead. Can they get to that excitement? Can they live up to the excitement? We will see. And it starts tonight, Charlie.
It does start. The Formula One circus starts tonight with a car launch from McLaren, and that will be available, as Zach mentioned, on YouTube and also Sky F1, 7 o'clock. Tune in for that car launch of McLaren. The MCL 35M is the name of the car that will be launched tonight. Can McLaren do better than third in the Constructors' Championship last year? We don't know that. So we'll have a think on that as well. But one final thing, Zach, before we finish, and that is we're going to mention something very, very important now that I think a lot of people are going to be wanting to talk about, and that's Parliament, because obviously next week it's a big week for a lot of people. We are finding out exactly when this lockdown in England is going to start being eased. March the 8th, the date that Boris Johnson says that he hopes schools can start potentially reopening, and then hopefully meeting up with another person in the park for a coffee had been another suggestion by another newspaper.
Yeah.
Jack, what do you expect the timeline is going to be for Boris to lift the lockdown? Is it going to be very, very important for him to strike that balance of being cautious and particularly being very considerate about the economy as well?
Yes. So I see how. Let's see how where this goes. Really, to be fair, Charlie. What I'm expecting really is, I think the obvious. March the 8th, schools are going to open again. Where from looking at the papers, it may well not be a phased approach. It may be that they all go back together. Now there is a bit of risk in that, Charlie, potentially, because, as you know, they're all congregating back indoors. So we will see. But we don't officially know that for sure yet. What we do know is it's very likely that March the 8th will be the date where educational settings will start reopening. Whether they're phased in or whether they all go back together, we don't know yet. It looks like as well that day we may well get a bit of relaxations on outdoors, like I predicted, where you can now where you'll be able to sit down for a coffee or go out with someone in person. And then onwards as well, we don't know from there onwards. There's talk about the rule of 6 potentially returning. I think that's very likely for future relaxations. April is looking, from what I've read, when the time that non-essential retail could open as well. So that could be another crucial area, because that would be the core part of the economy that could really do start opening. And then May to June, potentially we're looking at the relaunching of pubs, bars, restaurants, the hospitality sector. And then maybe May time as well, May, June time, we could have as I said, hospitality opening. You could have, you could have hotels reopening for the public. To be fair, you could have overnight stays somewhere, holidays maybe for summer, maybe holidays. And maybe entertainment could open as well, May, June time, something like that. But we don't know. That's a rough timeline from what I'm reading. How far now does this accommodate what the COVID recovery group wants? No, not exactly. Could they compromise? Maybe. But let's see. The plan is the COVID recovery group is guided by when all the top 9 groups are all vaccinated. The top 4 have now been vaccinated, so let's start really lifting some restrictions, maybe. Yes, obviously, March the 8th is going to be key. How fast we lift restrictions, is going to be how MPs are going to react. Boris wants it to be slower. The COVID recovery wants to be faster. They need to be careful. He needs to be careful, as I said, and he needs to get it right. He needs to follow scientific advice, especially on the schools where, if they send everyone back at once, it could potentially, from what the scientists have been saying, push the R rate above 1, which goes against his own scientific advice. Now, I remember when the Prime Minister didn't follow his own scientific advice in September, where they were asking him for a circuit break, and he ignored that for 6 weeks until accepting the inevitable. That cost wasted time, precious time, having that cost of an extra couple of lives that shouldn't be costed. So, yeah, the Prime Minister is going to have to be utterly careful with his decisions, and he's got to make sure it's right. So what I'm saying is it's probably going to be the first thing to open back to schools, definitely. Outdoor restrictions are probably going to be lifted, but the rule of 6 will remain. And then I think over the next couple of months, you'll gradually see non-essential retail open in April, pubs maybe in May, as well, the hospitality units as well, and holiday in June, July maybe as well. And obviously you expect household mixing potentially as well to be relaxed. What we might well see, Charlie, though, is social distancing still throughout, potentially from what I've read. So the 2 meter rule, the 1 meter rule potentially as well, that will still be here for the long run, from what I've read.
Yeah.
Because we don't know how it all depends on these variants. How effective are they against the vaccines, for example? How effective are they against community transmission of the virus? Whether someone can pass on with a vaccine or not. So that's the key to be clear, Charlie, and that's the one to be looking out for. And
I think
these variants will be guiding us as well, and the vaccinations will be guiding us to how this will work throughout the next few months.
I think, Zach, as well, before I wrap this up, face masks and face coverings. I heard yesterday on Sophie Ridge, Professor Tim Spector, who's the chair of this Zoe group, who of course runs an app. He said that masks and hand washing could potentially be still with us once the strictest lockdown restrictions have been lifted. I mean, masks into the future, is that possible potentially?
I think yes. I think so, Charlie. To be fair, I think so, because they're going to be crucial. No matter how you read this, you'll probably find that masks will still be here for a long time around. And some people might not like it, but I think it will be here. We are still going to see masks because I think they're going to be crucial to really getting us out. I think it's going to be. My bad. Yeah. So I think they're going to be crucial to getting us out and reducing the infection rate potentially, Charlie, once we're going through the vaccinations.
Yeah, and as well as that, I think when the shops and that reopen, and I think, could we do a Germany? Could we do potentially making stricter masks when worn in shops? Could that happen potentially?
Potentially. It's a good idea. It's a good idea, actually. Border restrictions, I think, and masks are here to stay, and social distancing are here to stay. I think the very basic rules, and then I think the basic requirements, whether people like it or not, I think they're here. And I don't think, to be fair, I don't think you have foreign holidays. I think you have British holidays. I don't think you have foreign holidays, because they'll want to keep the restrictions on the border here. They want to keep the social distance. They want to keep the infection rate low, and protection against a variant. So, yeah, I think that will all remain in place for the long term. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. No doubt about it.
It isn't, Zach. It's going to be here. I think the warning is, I think the border restrictions are going to be here for the foreseeable future. I'm sorry to say this. I just think that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you.
It's going to be interesting, Zach, because if you think about it, this virus is not going to go away anytime soon. Even Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson said we're probably going to have to learn to live with this disease, aren't we, in the future?
Yes, no doubt about it. The vaccines will become a yearly thing, no doubt about it. It will go back to how the flu was, where we just we live with the flu. We get vaccinated for the flu every year if needs to be. As long if we can turn the severity of COVID into something like a flu type, then that will be probably better, and that would be good, because then it will just be like flu, and then we probably won't have to worry about it. We can just live our lives as normal. But yeah, I see it as a yearly, seasonal thing in the future, where we get vaccinated every year for COVID, and we learn to live with it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's it, everyone, for the Globetrotter Newscast today. Thank you for everyone for watching this podcast. I'm sure a lot of people are now going to be tuning in to the news because the Prime Minister is now on, Boris Johnson's now on in Downing Street with the press briefing where he'll be updating the nation on coronavirus. Thank you for listening, everyone. And I'll be back next week here on the Globetrotter Newscast to review everything about the Prime Minister's roadmap for easing coronavirus lockdown restrictions. In the meantime, everyone, stay safe, everyone, and take care. Goodbye.